Hello and welcome to this episode of Leadership Conversations on behalf of Women Automotive Network. I'm your host today. My name is Micha Goebig. I'm a confidence and leadership coach for women in male-dominated industries, as well as the owner of a bilingual communications agency for German car makers and the supplier industry. Today, I am very excited to be talking with Katharina Hopp, Senior Vice President IT and Business Unit Lead Mobility Solutions at Bosch. Thanks for being with us today, Katharina.
Thank you for the invitation.
A little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Micha, and also thank you for the invitation of the Automotive Network. I'm really excited to be here because we've already talked about a favorite topic in the last summit of the Women Automotive Network, and this is about how that would drive diversity. So my background basically is from transformation and bringing perspectives together and making teams grow. And then in all various kinds of functions, I started out eventually as a management trainee and then went to become a product manager for cordless drill drivers. So yes, in the power tools industry. Then I went on to the central headquarters, and I also founded a business unit on urban mobility. And at the moment, I am staying with the corporate IT, where I'm heading the mobility area, which also is quite a transformative job to bring business and IT together. On a personal note, I live here in Germany after various assignments abroad. Now with my family, I have 2 kids, I'm married, and I fancy reading and sports if there's any time left.
Thank you for sharing that. And you've already mentioned diversity, so I guess I can guess the answer to the first real question, but let's hear it. Why did you get involved with the Women Automotive Network as a speaker primarily?
Well, because I really love the idea that we got to drive diversity, and I think women are one of our largest diversity group. In general, I favor kind of all kinds of diversity. It's also about generations and age. It's also about cultures and internationals. But I think especially women in the automotive industry still need to grow a stronger number and a stronger majority in that area.
Yeah. So we're all for female empowerment here.
Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of power, I read your motto, and we just have to share that with the audience. It's great. If everything is under control, you are not driving fast enough. That's an amazing, badass motto. So you're really a go-getter and a driver of things. We've heard that already with your professional bio. Where do you feel like the automotive industry is not hitting the pedal to the metal right now?
Well, I think the one thing about this motto is about speed. And I think the automotive industry could definitely use even more speed than what they apply already, from becoming hardware-centric to software-centric. Mm-hmm. There is, I think, a certain understanding already that software will be differentiating in future from a customer's and a user's perspective. But I think from a manufacturer's perspective, we're not there yet quite. Second, I also think it's about collaboration between the players. Here again, we do see companies collaborating on things, but I think we should see much, much more that we combine powers instead of developing it all by ourselves. And third, basically, it's the shift in the mindset, also from how we look at people, how we acquire people, how we evaluate people. And there's, I think, much more necessary coming. It comes along with this software focus to see that we should not maybe only look how much experience do people have, how many years are they already in a certain industry or a company, but rather look by what can they contribute to our new challenges, and rather look into those skills and say, okay, which kind of competencies and skills do they bring with us? But the second part of this quote, and allow me to mention, it's also about having control or not having control. And I think this is also something where we need to start a little bit letting loose of having everything under control, but trusting our people, trusting our networks, trusting the crowd that we're eventually going to find the solution. So this is also about not having everything under control.
I love that. That's super important to mention, because in transition times, especially, like, what is the quote? Growth only happens outside of our comfort zone. Whoever said it, I don't know, but there is, of course, a lot of truth in that, and we have to trust that development at a certain point. I love that. And you talked about software centric a few times, so let's look at your own career for another moment, because you have spent most of your career in IT areas, in software-centric areas. So you kind of have a leg up on many people in your industry at this point, I would think. So how does that background serve you exactly? And also, how does it connect to your passion for diversity?
You're absolutely right. When I joined the automotive sector, which was a couple of years ago after my power tools time, this whole software, the urban mobility part was really about being software centric, about putting data in the center. And I have to be very honest, for me it was also quite a learning curve to really see what IT and what software can do for us. But for me, it was the key learning that we need to embrace it. We need to embrace the agility. We need to embrace the constant learning. And I think this is something about software and IT people that's very fascinating for me, that they're always learning about new tools, about new technologies. So they're quite open to bring on new things. Second, I think this idea of that you deliver something that you already know will never be ready. For them, it could be a threat, but I perceive it rather as a relief to say, okay, we can still fix it afterwards, right? You can have another release, you can add another function. Mm-hmm. So to have this ongoing life cycle, not like with hardware, once it's gone, right? You can, if you really have to call it back, it's going to be at a very expensive state. So exactly having this opportunity to improve your product, although it's already used, I think this is something, this idea of not having to deliver the final product at a pitch perfect timing. I think this is really something we should embrace also more in the future of mobility.
Yeah, I mean, circular development and the iterations and the agile approach to working, it offers, of course, it's huge, right, for the automotive industry going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how about the diversity piece? How does that come into play in a software-centric world? And because there are a lot of challenges right now still.
Well, absolutely. And I think in general, you need much more skills when you're talking about software, and when you're talking about also the point of connectivity that's coming up. This allows a car to be something really else. A car can be an experience and will be an experience, even if we're coming to the stage of autonomous driving, where you not even have to focus your attention on anything around driving. So what you could do in that time. And I think this is part where we need diverse talents, where we really need different skills, where things like UX, the user experience, that has been to some interest in the past, but now becomes a really new connotation. What happens if your UX is not only around how a car smells or how the steering wheel feels, but it's really how you perceive the car, what you can do in a car, if you can watch movies, do your shopping or whatever. So this is really something that we need to learn to understand what users want and become even more centric, because personally, I'm absolutely convinced that coming from a differentiating point of view, the importance of hardware will, in relevance, decrease.
Yeah, and that's where the diversity becomes so important, because the user experience is different, right? By regions, by gender, by cultures, by age, by many, many factors. So
yeah, and exactly. And I think you can see that, for example, Asia is really ahead of us when it comes to digital and to customer experience. And I think this is something where I think you cannot create a car with a high focus on user experience for the Asian market without having people from the Asian culture involved into your teams, right? And the good thing is if it really mixes, if you have people from Asia, if you have people from Germany, if you have people from the US, it all mix them together. And it's the same thing about diversity when it comes to women, right? Mm-hmm. Women are very often the user of a car. I would say statistically, obviously, in 50% of the cases, right, more or less. So,
and I think the purchasing decisions, the number is even higher.
Yes, So how do they make the decisions? How do they, what are their expectations towards a user experience? And of course, you can have now males trying to guess it, or you can have women right in the team helping to shape it.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And so you work for one of the very, very large supplier companies. And I apologize for saying that supplier companies weren't that sexy in the past necessarily, if I may say that. But now with that software-centric focus, I feel like supplier companies are really getting in a very different, they're positioned in a very different space. It's way more interesting from an outsider's perspective. So as it's all about people, how is your company as a large supplier working on diversity and drawing talent to the industry, to your company? It's a competition with big tech.
Absolutely. And I think the huge advantage is of companies like Bosch, or for Bosch at least, that we're only doing part of our business with automotive. Mm-hmm. So we have huge diversity. Just look at my career coming from power tools originally, now going to the automotive and up even in IT. And we have several careers in that direction where I think it's also about the flexibility. When you're designing an experience, and you're good at deciding an experience, and whatever it is, if it's from a marketing perspective, or it's from a technical perspective, if it's from a programmer's perspective, you can do it for cars, but you could as well do it for, I don't know, thermal technology, or you can do it for cameras. So there's really a broad depth where you can also change and evolve yourself further. I think this is one of the points. The second point is that I think large suppliers like Bosch is, we're doing a lot on diversity, how we're going to cater, for example, for working models. We've just recently launched the so-called smart work, where you were able to work up to 54 days outside of your home country. And this is quite amazing if you think about it, especially attracting young digital talent. This is a huge asset. Another asset is that we're equipping our people with the right environment, with the right equipment. So if you have a proper iPhone, if you have a proper laptop, this really is fun to work at. And after all, I think one of our really strong foots is, and this is something where I think we are quite modern, is we have several working models. Remote working is not new for us. We have it already for years. And now with Corona, we've been able to ramp up very quickly to make sure that everybody works from home. So thanks, a big kudos to my colleagues from the infrastructure IT. They did a fantastic job, but also from how we steer people. And I think this really makes a difference. How you can get more diverse talent, how you can get more younger talent, more digital talent, by showing them what the company also can do for them, and then creating an environment that maybe is not hire and fire, but really is about more appreciation. And yes, there can be, of course, always more appreciation. That is true. But I think the good thing is also about Bosch, it's very value driven. You can see that, for example, on our work on sustainability. This is, we do feel in the company, and I think everybody who is in the company would share that with me, feel a strong commitment to the legacy of Robert Bosch, the original founder, who was a very human-centric and a very sustainability-oriented person. You can see in many quotes he posted. Amazing, and I think this is also something, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And this purpose is also something where we feel that the younger generation is much more looking at and saying, who am I working for? What are the values behind? Is it just another stakeholder value, or do they really live it? And they constantly challenge us on how good we are in that. And this is actually good. We need this younger generation. We need the diverse people to challenge us and say, let's see how good you are in that. So only that really makes sure things are getting moving forward.
I love that. And I think it's getting even more important in what we're seeing right now with the unprecedented migrations in the global employment market. We call it the Great Resignation in the US. Yeah. And we are seeing something like that in Europe too, maybe not quite to the extent, but what are the demands and wishes of your workforce now that we're sort of, I don't know if we can call it optimistically, the tail end of the pandemic? But what are people asking for now that we've had this turmoil that also led to more flexibility and remote work?
Well, I think the pandemic in every individual of us triggered something, right? And I don't, from my environment, I do know not a single person that did not ask the questions, do I want to go on like that? What is really meaningful to me? How do I want to continue in my life? How do I set priorities? And I think independent of age and of job situation, a lot of people ask themselves that question. And I think as an employer, you've got to make sure that you have an answer to your people when it comes to work-related question, what is in for me? And do I really want to continue this? So I think what we need to do now to make sure our associates and colleagues get a good leadership because they deserve it. We need to make sure, and I think here we're also quite good in explaining the purpose and explaining what you're doing, explaining what is the target, that you just don't feel like a number somewhere in the system, but you really are felt as a human. This also means to me getting personal, getting into interaction. And now finally, with the pandemic coming, at least for now, to an end, face-to-face meetings are allowed again, team building events can take place. And you can really see how this is energizing people and how really everybody in the room feels this team spirit again. And I think this is super important to drive forward these elements. And last but not least, I think also what my observation is, at least from the Great Resignation, I think we need to talk to people actively about options for development. And this doesn't necessarily mean always stepping up the ladder and everybody wants to become a CEO. Very often it's the opposite, actually. But many people want to see how can I get into mastery? How can I get into things that I can do better? How can I make a sidestep? And for example, on top of my regular work, take the responsibility for a task that I really fancy because I just want to learn something new. And I think we have to talk much more proactively with people about how they can develop and progress themselves in their personal development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's, for instance, that very interesting concept of the 20% time where you work on a passion project and those things. So I think there's still a lot of options to explore. Is there anything in particular that you, as a leader, an executive, and a mother yourself, see that needs to be done to accommodate working moms, especially to raise the share of women, especially in that middle tier where the rung is obviously broken between the career advancement?
Well, I think this is a really complex topic, right?
Yes.
Yes. I think there is something that society or the politics can do, for example, to ensure that you have, especially in Germany, that's quite a topic, that you have daycare available, that you have schools that are open all day and don't finish at 12 o'clock and so on. So you have to make sure that you get support for all what kids need and what moms and parents especially need to make sure that their kids are served well. The second, I think, the remote work, we just now started it, forced by Corona everywhere. And I think many leaders in companies, especially also in mid-sized companies, realized how well it works. And I think this remote work, both on location and also on timing, really helps families a lot. For example, if you can step out and say, okay, I'm not going to do any meeting after 5 o'clock, and if I do and then I want to do dinner with my kids, or I bring them to, I don't know, ballet class or whatever. But afterwards, I can still work on my emails, and I don't mind if they finish them off at some time at night because that's my biorhythm. Or I start at, I don't know, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning before everybody's awake. I'm going to do 1 hour of emails. So really, this asynchronity of location and time, I think this really helps if we can manage this and agree more on some core times instead of thinking that who is not present is not there. And I think Corona taught us a lesson that I hope is going to continue.
Yeah, and it's especially it's a leadership lesson, right? A lot of leaders now have to really step up their game for this new environment. And let me guess, women will do well to step their game up in that direction.
Absolutely.
Speaking about women leaders, do you have a role model or someone who inspired you maybe when you were early in your career?
That's an interesting question. And I thought about this because I've got it before. Actually, I would not say that I have that one role model because there were actually, to be honest, very few women around me when I was starting my career that were actually already in good managing positions.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say that and I'm also more not having that one role model, but I'm taking pieces of different people where I would say, okay, they're inspiring to me. And it's not only about women. I mean, I can remember my former boss, or one of my very first bosses, Martina Ehrmann, who did a great job on this. Then, for example, I have people that I've met like Sonja Mecheling, like Birgit Potrawski. They're very inspiring in what they do, although they're very different. But usually I admire several traits of them, and then I just pick them for inspiration. But they're also people like I just met 2 years ago, like Vera Schneevogt, who has been for me an inspiration on how to get better in networking and how to activate networks. And I also have to say that Stefan Hartung, I had the pleasure to work for a while. Although he's a male, I think he had very modern. He has a very modern style of leadership and a very positive connotation towards people. So this for me also was quite a role model in developing my own leadership style. So there is not that one, but many great and fantastic people I was lucky to work with or to observe.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, because I think that's important, especially for younger women, to hear that you really have a choice how you develop your leadership style, and just picking your elements from best boss and or people you just see. So on that note, is there some must-have or must-do for young women interested in the automotive industry, either on the engineering side or also on the non-technical side?
Well, I would say no. Come as you are. Come as you are. Dare it. It's a cool industry. I think the industry is so much a transformation. And if you want to do things in a little bit, of course, transformation is always more complex because building up is the one thing, right? There you have to manage the speed and to get the resources on, and you have different challenges because you have a so-called green field and you don't know sometimes how you do. Transformation has the advantage that there's already existing framework that you can build upon. On the other hand, it's sometimes not so easy to keep the existing business running, keep existing customers happy, and in the meanwhile, define the future and reinvent yourself. So just on a personal note, this is the part that always struck me more, where I thought this is the real complex challenge, how to develop that. So, and I think this is something where the automotive industry is right in this transformation phase. So everybody who's courageous, everybody who wants to try new things, I think is super suitable for the automotive industry at the moment.
Thank you for that. I think that's exactly what it is. It's such a time of opportunity. It's very exciting. People who are drawn to that will really find a good home there right now, especially, and going forward. Yes. Last question. What advice? I mean, you have kids, so that might be a little easier for you than for people without kids. What advice would you give, looking back, your 16-year-old self?
Well, I think there are two things I would advise myself. I would first advise myself to really believe in myself and to be confident, and to also trust. This is the one thing, to trust in my abilities and trust in my skills. And on the other hand, to build networks and leverage it. This is something I've just learned when I was older, to realize you're surrounded by advisors, by helping hands, by supporters, by mentors. You just need to speak out loud. You need to let them know that you have an issue. And today I'm much more confident to talk about things I don't know, things I'm not able to do, because that will attract those people that are complementary to you and help you to do the things. You don't have to do it all by yourself, but actually complementing and partnering up with the right people, with the right partners in crime. I think this is so important. So yeah, I think this would be my advice to my younger self.
I love that. I love that, because so many of us struggle with asking for help or saying, I don't know. And I feel like it's women also struggle with leveraging their networks. Most are really good in meeting people and fostering their network and giving to their network, but not that much in receiving. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that's all we have for today. Thanks, Katharina, for being here and sharing your story and sharing your outlook on the industry and raising the excitement bar for women joining the industry or starting their career out right now and going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Micha.